So my wife sent me to the hardware store the other day, and as I was leaving, she said, "Hey, ask for help while you're there." You know? Yeah. And inside, I'm like, I don't need to do that. I know where it is. I can find. I was looking for a bolt because my son's scooter broke and the wheel came off, and I was like, well, I can go find this and all that. I can do it. I can find this right size screw. What is she? And so I'm there. I get it. I come back home. I go to put it in the spot, and guess what? Wrong size. I don't like to ask for help. I don't like to ask for help. Maybe you can relate. I mean, do you struggle to ask for help? Now, there's something in the gambling world, okay, called the martingale system, all right? What is the martingale system? Well, this is the idea, the theory that when you're gambling, that if you lose a bet, to immediately double down and on the next bet. And if you lose again, double down again. And if you lose again, double down again. And the theory is eventually the odds will go in your favor and you will at least even out with a win. Does this work? No, it does not work. Okay, you might get lucky from time to time, but I mean, seriously, gambling among many things can become a problem, and at some point we need to realize, let's not double down here, let's get some help, And this is what we do, though. Whenever we're at a deficit in life, whenever we're facing some kind of difficulty or we find ourselves in some kind of trouble, rather than asking for help, what do? We double down. We double down on our current methods. You've been in the argument, right, where you're like, okay, I said it. Let me just say that again with a little bit more tone. They'll get it then, right? You've been there. You've doubled down on the methods. We double down on self-sufficiency. And what we do, rather than asking for help, what we do is we dig ourselves into an even deeper hole. What are you doubling down on right now? How's it going? Is it getting better? Are you getting richer? Do you feel freer, So all of us, are facing some kind of problem, and they just kind of come up, right? How are you going to get help? Now, Psalm 46:1 says, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Maybe you came into church today and you're in a deep hole. What is your strategy to getting out? Your marriage might be in a deep hole today. You've been doubling down on broken method after broken method after broken method. Your faith may be in a deep hole today. Your relationship with God, bumpy and choppy at best. You might be in a deep hole because you've lied. And now you're trying to hold on to that secret, and it just keeps getting deeper and deeper. You might be in a deep hole because you're struggling with some kind of sin. And you've convinced yourself that, no one else notices this sin. And that might be true. You might have dug such a deep hole with your attitude. I mean, all it takes is to be in the presence of some person, and you're not who you need to be. There's something going on there. You might be in such a deep hole because you have come to a place in your life where you have just become so quietly judgmental. And it's affecting you, and it's making you grumpy, and it's not the Holy Spirit, it's your flesh, it's you. Okay? And so what do we need to do? Because God is able to help us. Listen, God is able to help us with what we need. He's able to help us with what we can't do and with what we don't have. every trouble God is able to help you with. He's a refuge. He's a place you can go, a shelter to run to where you can find strength. And he's able to help us now. Did you notice he's an ever-present help? He's not a future help. He's a help right now. And the word help in that psalm, that first verse of chapter 46, the word help actually comes from the word ezer, which is helper, which is like when God looked at Adam and he saw that, it wasn't good for him to be alone, and then he made a suitable helper for him, an ezer for him. And then Adam saw Eve and he's like, that's exactly what I needed, I needed her. And God made her to be a helper, not as a diminishing thing, by no means, because God is calling himself a helper. And so what is this giving us an imagery of here is that God is able, like Eve came alongside Adam, he's able to come alongside you in your struggle, whatever that trouble is. Now, why does it seem like God's help, why does it sometimes seem like it's not present? It's never present help. But why does it seem sometimes like it's not there? It's not available. It's not right next to me. I'm in this hole. Where are you? We've been in this series called ReMarkAble, and it's kind of a play on words. We're talking about the gospel or the book of Mark, which tells about the life and the account and the actions of Jesus. So that's the Mark. And then the Able is we're talking about the miracles of Jesus. And so we've been in this series, and if you ever wonder, like, why does God do miracles? Why does Jesus come doing miracles? And it's a real clear reason. He wanted us to know who he was and what he was able to do, so that everyone in his context and throughout the years would know that we can trust that he is an ever-present help, able to help us in any trouble. And so today we're going to look at a miracle, and it's actually interesting because Jesus took 3 of his disciples up to a mountaintop, and there was this, remarkable revealing of who Jesus was. It's a real worshipful moment. The curtain gets pulled back. They get to see a little bit more about who God is, and they're heading down the mountain from this experience where the 9 other disciples were, and we're going to encounter 3 characters who need help. So if you've got a Bible, if you want to open up to the Bible app in your phone, turn to Mark chapter 9. I'll start reading in verse 14. When they came to the other disciples, remember they're coming down the mountain. When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them, and the teachers of the law arguing with them. So talking about his disciples and the teachers of the law were arguing. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. And then Jesus says, "What are you arguing with them about?" What a wonderful picture of, Jesus is coming down the mountain. This is the world Jesus comes down to, by the way, when he takes upon flesh. He comes down to a place of arguing, people that are overwhelmed and in need of help. I mean, that's literally the world we live in, isn't it? Nothing but arguing, overwhelm. Everyone needs help. Everyone's dug a hole. And so he asks, hey, what are you arguing about? And he's asking you that question today. What's the trouble you're in? What's causing all the stir? The story continues. A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son, who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." Now watch what Jesus does here. "You unbelieving generation." I mean, Jesus talks like this. I mean, we don't always, this is just such a stark, sometimes contrast in our mind with how Jesus addresses people. He says, you unbelieving generation, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me. So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Okay, imagine this. This boy is in an epileptic type situation, and now the father and Jesus are watching this, and they're having a conversation. Jesus asked the boy's father, how long? How long has he been like this? From childhood, he answered. It's often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him, as they're watching it happen right now, real time. But if he looks at Jesus, maybe he doesn't look at Jesus. Maybe he sort of looks down and kind of kicks his foot in the dust or something. He says, but if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. And then Jesus, maybe he puts his hand on his shoulder. Whatever he does, he probably gets his attention. He says, if you can, everything is possible for one who believes. Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the impure spirit. You deaf and mute spirit, he said, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. The spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand. This is resurrection language. He took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. After Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, why couldn't we drive it out? He replied, this kind can only come out by prayer. So the way Mark frames this narrative for us, we want to begin to focus on the boy that has this, evil spirit that causes seizure-like things. But let me just, again, I'm not going to go a ton into this today because the section is really telling us to focus on the disciples and focus on the Father. Those are the main characters here. In Mark chapter 5, a few weeks ago, I dealt with a little bit around this evil spirit thing, and that was the whole focus of that. So if you're wondering and wanting more of that, I'd say go back and listen to that. But the one thing I will say is they were not mistaking epilepsy for demon possession. They knew the difference, and it shows up over and over in Scripture. And so they were not making this mistake, and you can learn that right away because they said, it throws him, whenever he goes by water or fire, it throws him. So there's an intentional attempt to destruct here, okay? So that's very different than a condition called epilepsy. So you need to understand that. But there's some issues going on here. We have some people who need help. What should we do when we need help? And we see it modeled in different ways. When you need help, you ask for it. The disciples ask for help. The father asks for help. Even the boy asks for help in a way. So if you want help, what do you need? You need to be brutally honest. What is that? What's brutal honesty? And why do we resist it? Why do we need it so bad? And how do we do it? So I want to look at the first thing. What is brutal honesty? Because if you want help, you have to have it. And we see it right away in Jesus. Jesus is brutally honest when he comes down the mountain and they tell him the problem. He's so honest with them. It almost makes us go, wow, that's a little intense, Jesus. Now, when I say brutal, I want you to understand, I don't mean unnecessarily hurtful or harassing. Because it matters what you say, and it matters how you say it, okay? Just because you got the truth doesn't mean you know how to deliver it. That's a whole sermon right there. Some of you just need to go home and work on that, okay? Brutal honesty is not hurtful, but it's helpful. Now, I broke my elbow last summer, and it hurt so bad. It hurt so bad I could barely bend it, and I went in to get an x-ray, and the x-ray tech looked at me like I was about to die, and she said, now this is going to hurt. And I was like, what's the big deal? An x-ray. She's like, well, this is actually probably the most painful kind of x-ray because I'm going to need you to bend it. And I'm like, okay. And so they put it under the scanner, and she's like, you got to bend it more. And I'm like, well, it hurts really. You're not going to be able to see it if you do it. And so I'm pressing it, I'm like, grimacing and all that. And she's taking the photo. And as she's doing that, she's also telling me, she's like, hey, I know it hurts. I know it hurts. This will be quick. I'll be quick. I know it hurts. It'll be quick. And so she takes the image, and she goes back, and she comes back in. She's like, well, it didn't really take the first time. All right, so we got to do this again. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And so she's like, can you bend it more? Let's do it this way. About a little bit this way. Okay, I think that's it. And I understand that in the process, like, she wasn't trying to be brutal to me. She was trying to get a clear picture of what's really going on in my arm so that it could be helped, so that I could be healed. And so Jesus comes down the mountain, and he hears the problem, he hears the trouble they're in, and he tells the brutal truth. And it sounds hard, it sounds harsh, but it's the medicine that they need. In verse 20, he says, you unbelieving generation. And he's not scolding, he's lamenting. He knows that they don't have something they need to have. And he doesn't know how much time he has left to give it to them. And so I don't know how many more times I'm going to be able to put this under the x-ray, and tell you this is what you need. And then in verse 23, the Father, looks at Jesus and says, if you can. And Jesus says, if I can. And then in verse 30, the disciples go to him privately, and they're like, hey, why couldn't we? What Jesus does in each of these scenarios is he essentially says the same thing. He essentially says, the problem is, the reason why you're in this trouble, the reason why you couldn't do anything to get out of it is because you don't have faith. Every single time. And the truth is painful. But it's purposeful. See, when we become totally honest, that's when we're able to get some help. And you cannot be helped without sometimes very true, very honest remarks. We resist it. We know we need it, but we resist it. Why do we resist brutal honesty? Because what we do instead is we have a tendency to sort of bend the truth a little bit. We have a tendency, this is all people, this is me too, we have a tendency to massage the truth a little bit in our presentation, especially if it might come back on us. Sometimes we just outright reject the truth because we don't like it. We reframe it, we soften it. And the reason why we do this is because we want to prevent pain. We don't like the way the truth makes us feel because it pierces. And we actually resist the brutal truth sometimes because we're trying to keep from pain. And then what we do is we create more pain. We think it's going to help us by sort of lying about it or not really being totally honest with ourselves or about the situation or whatever, and it only causes us more pain. Now, the truth was in this situation is that the disciples were trying to help this father and this boy, and they had failed. And they were arguing. Did you notice that? They were arguing. I wonder what they were arguing about. They were probably being defensive with the, religious leaders. They were probably saying, well, this is why this didn't work this time. And, if I do this right next time. And they're probably justifying themselves and giving good reasons. And all they're doing is not wanting to look at themselves and going, we failed. Why do we resist brutal honesty? Well, we're trying to prevent pain. We're trying to protect pride. You know pride. It's the, I can do it. I'm able to do it. They must know that I can do it. Don't ever let anybody know that I can't do it. I can do it. And it's part of the brutal truth is we like to think we're self-dependent, that we can handle and solve any hole we get ourselves into. And if we think that, we don't ask for help, and then we stay in the hole. Sometimes we bring others down into it with us. Now, the Father, as he talks with Jesus, he says, what does he say? He says, I brought him. I brought him to you, to your disciples. And so in his own mind, he's saying, I did my part. I brought him. My efforts. The disciples, when they got away with Jesus privately afterwards, they asked him, hey, why couldn't we do this? And Jesus says, hey, you need prayer for this. What is Jesus saying? He's saying, here's what happened. You are depending on your gifts, on your formulas. A few chapters ago, he gave them the power to do this. And now it seems like they're operating in their own ability. They have gifts, they have talents, they have strengths, and now they're failing. And Jesus is saying, hey, you're not depending on me. You're trying all this on your own. You're depending on you. You're depending on your previous success. You're depending on your efforts. Listen, enough with the protecting of pride, because the truth is you are not self-sufficient. This is kind of morbid, but every time we drive by a graveyard, you should be reminded that you are not self-sustainable. That's why we hide them. We don't want that reminder. Dependent? No, I'm good. I can do it. See, your pride's going to resist full honesty, and then we're not going to ask for help. Because we'd rather preserve places. Because you and I actually we have created some shelters we go to, some places of refuge we go to when we're struggling. Because the truth is, you and I are always building a shelter of our own strength, trusting in our abilities, trusting in our giftedness and our methods and our efforts. Even in our religion, you might be religious, and you're not dependent on the Lord. You're dependent on your ability to follow the Lord. You know? You're like, I read my Bible in the morning, it's going to be a great day. And you're depending on your discipline rather than on who the discipline points to. There's a difference there. And we like to think that even spiritually, even as it relates to Jesus, that we're actually somehow partially responsible for building up a self-sustaining identity. It's a shelter we run to. And so whenever we're in trouble, we want to think of ourselves as pious or moral, or at least more moral than them, And we appeal to our efforts. We appeal to whatever it is that we think makes us morally good. And when we do that, we're running to our own shelter. See, without brutal honesty, you're always going to appeal to yourself. You're always going to be like, well, I had the power before, or I'm prosperous, or I do this and this and this and this. And I'm telling you, that is not faith in Jesus. That's faith in you. Why do we struggle to say, I can't? Well, it's because to say I can't, you have to undo this identity that you've worked so hard to create. You've worked so hard to build it, that you're a good person, that you're a good parent, that you're a good Christian, that you're a good whatever. You've worked so hard to build it. And to say I can't would somehow mean this whole thing you've been building would have to come tumbling down. And let me tell you, it's exactly what needs to happen, because you will not be helped if your only help is you. You will continue to double down, and you will continue to cry out for help and have none, because you're only asking yourself for help. It's human nature to do that. I do that. We go to false places of help, and a lot of times it's ourself. That's why the self-help industry is so huge. Is we think, well, let me get a coffee and a book, and I'll be good by Friday. You know better than that. You're missing something. We resist it. Okay, so why do we need brutal honesty? I think you understand that you resist it, but why do we need it? And I sort of said it already. I'm going to say it again. Without brutal honesty, you don't really get help. And the reason why we need it so bad is because we actually really need help. All the time we're in the presence of troubles. And I'm going to outline 3 troubles that we see in this text. We're always dealing with difficulties, doubts, and evil all the time. They're always present. And so we need an ever-present help in all of those. The disciples, they were dealing with a difficulty. The presence of difficulties is what we're going to talk about first. This is why we need it. And so I don't know what you're trying to do right now and having no success with. I don't know if, like me, you're trying to be a kinder person and you're failing. I don't know if you're trying to love someone from the heart that you know you ought to be loving from the heart. I don't know if you're trying to forgive someone. I don't know if you've got a decision you need to make. You might be in a difficult season of parenting, and it takes all the selfishness out of your life, you know. I don't know if you're in a difficult season of health, a difficult financial season. Maybe you're aging, and that's a whole nother difficult season. Maybe you're an emerging young person, and you're trying to discover who you are, what you need to do, and you're also torn because you're like, is this the right path? Is this the true God? What about, all these kinds of things going on. See, we're all in different places of difficulties, and we're in trouble, and we don't like to say we're in trouble, but we really are. They're here, they're present, and the presence of difficulties in your life should make you aware of something. Your powerlessness. You need help. You cannot and should not depend on yourself. See, we like to run to our performance and our past record. We like to look at our moral, goodness or our past, accolades. We like to appeal to our knowledge or our gifts to get help. But what we need to do is we need to flee those false shelters, and we need to run to the refuge that actually gives us strength. So Jesus comes down the mountain, and they ran to him for help. That's what you need to do. Stop running to something else for help. You run to him. Because what you're facing, the trouble you're in, it's too hard. It's too hard on your own. So the father, he needs help too. He's in the presence of doubt. That's what he's dealing with. Doubts. And see, sometimes we're in the presence of doubts. And the fact that we're in the presence of doubts should prove to us that we need help from God. You might ask, how does doubt prove anything about God? Doesn't it do the opposite? Isn't it destructive? Well, let's look at doubt for just a second. What is doubt? Well, doubt is questioning if something is true. You can actually doubt what is actually true, right? And then miss a truth. And you can also believe what is not actually true and believe a lie. This is very real. We're constantly in this trouble with all kinds of things. What that means is, in our world, the fact that doubt is here and it's present is that we're in a crisis of truth. Truth is very slippery in our world, and for you, and for me. It's kind of like trying to catch a fish, You throw out, and you've ever been fishing, and you expert fishermen, this isn't your problem. But for those of us that are not, it's great. We're dragging it along the bottom, and we're like, oh, is that a bite? Is that a bite? It's not a bite. It's a rock, okay? Somebody reeling and says, oh, I got a bite. No, you didn't. You just dragged it against a stick. That was not a bite, because you know the difference when it yanks on the pole there, all right? And so we're sort of doing that a little bit, where we're sort of like, oh, what the rock? It's a rock. It's a fish, and it's like, no, it's a rock. We actually aren't believing the right thing. Truth is slippery because things can convince us and be similar and pull and all sorts of things. See, if you have doubt, it makes having faith difficult. It makes trusting in anything difficult. But let me just say this. If you say you do not doubt, you would therefore are also saying you have perfect faith. And I like what Craig Rochelle says in his book, The Benefit of the Doubt, and I would encourage you maybe to pick it up. I started reading it, I think it's really good. Some think of faith as a destination, As in, someday I will arrive. I will have graduated like those perfect people who don't struggle with doubts the way that I do. Someday I'll have perfect faith too. And can I give you a resounding no to that? You will not arrive. You will not have perfect faith. In fact, that might be the most dangerous thing for you, to think you're really great. Because then you won't ask for help. You'll trust in yourself. That's why I say the presence of doubt, in a way, proves to us our need for help, that we're not self-sufficient. There's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I've got a picture for you right here. And this is the idea that, especially if you're young or if you're new to a field, you're studying something, on the left side all the way to the top, this shows that when we begin to engage with something, we kind of come to it with a false sense of confidence. Like, I got the corner on this topic or this market or whatever. And so we have this inflated view of self. And as we grow older or as we begin to handle it more, this applies to faith too. The more we go to church, the more we read the Bible, the more we're learning. What ends up happening over time is our confidence starts to dip. And it starts to go down, because the more we're learning about something, here's what happens. The more we realize we don't know much about it. And the more we start to feel insecure, and the more we're like, I don't know if I believe, and why does it say that? And so we get down to this pit right here called the valley of despair. See, the more you walk with God, the more you're in His Word, the more you'll start to see that you're not self-sufficient, that you don't know it all, that there's things about God you haven't discovered yet. And then when you discover them, you're going to be like, whoa. You get down to this pit. You're in this place of humility. It's a slump of doubt. And in that place, if you're a Christian, you feel powerless. And if that's you today, if you're in a slump of doubt, you're right where you need to be. Because it's in that place where you will meet God. It's in that place that you will actually ask Him for help. And if you see the way this curve goes, as it starts to slowly go back up, because you meet God in it, and you appropriately move forward in your faith without too much self-confidence, and with just enough reassurance to know that God is there, He's able, and He never wants you to be filled with pride, And it's humbling, and I don't like it. It's just the way it is. So if you have doubt, listen, don't let it take you out. Don't let it drown you. What do you need to do with it? You need to run to God with it. You need to admit it. And this is what the Father does. Did you notice? He says, if you can help me. What's He saying? He's saying, I don't really believe that you can. And then Jesus looks at him. He says, if I can. And then the Father, what does He do? He says, in Mark 9:24, He says, immediately the Father's exclaimed, He said, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. Wait a second. He has faith and doubt at the same time? What's different here? Brutal honesty. And it's when he is totally truthful and he says, I believe and I don't. Help me. But that's right then and there. That's when God shows up. Otherwise, he might think he did it. You might think you did it. And that would be the worst thing for you. See, do you see? We can have faith and doubt at the same time. And to some degree, it's necessary, because otherwise we would just be so full of self-confidence, we would never go to God. So when you're doubting, don't let doubt defeat you, but let it drive you to God. Because if you didn't have some degree of doubt, listen, you would never ask for help. And you're human. You're not self-sufficient. And God is not afraid of your doubts. He'll meet you right there. And He'll take you right out of them. Total dependence on Him. Finally, I want to just bring up a third trouble that we find ourselves in. It's the presence of evil, which is kind of lurking in this whole passage, right? You see the boy who is struggling with this, evil spirit that's causing this thing, that's trying to kill him, really. It's trying to get after him. And Jesus asked him, hey, how long has he dealt with this? And he says, from childhood. What's interesting here is that we all see the presence of evil. And we see the trouble. This is one reason why there's all kinds of world religions, is because all over the world, everyone's trying to ask, why is there evil in the world and how do we bring it to justice? We all sort of sense this shouldn't be here. There's something better. And some religions will sort of explain how evil is a part of the whole process, but not the Christian faith. The Christian faith does not talk about evil as a part of bringing about God's plan. The Christian faith talks about evil as a sort of rebellion against God, a sort of pride against God, a sort of dependence on self against God. And like the son, he struggled with evil from childhood. So have you. Just like him. Evil has come into your life. It's not just out there. See, the Bible tells us evil came in here from childhood. It's an ongoing struggle. It has tried to kill you. It has tried to shipwreck your marriage. It has led you to do the most ridiculous things. Do you see it? It's trying to throw you into the fire. And it's too hard for us to deal with. You can do nothing on your own to deal with it. James describes it this way in James chapter 1. He says, but each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire. So we like to think the evil is all out there, which is not brutal honesty. The brutal honesty is, no. It's worked its way in here, and it's enticed us. And then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Don't be deceived. So he uses this word tempt, which is the same word as test. And here's the test every day for you. Can I really trust God? Is he my ever-present help? Is he all that I need? And every single one of us has been dragged away to say, no, he's not. At some point in your life, you've said, he's not my help in this area. I don't trust him. And the Bible calls this sin. And it gives this imagery of birth, which means like, oh, it's promising and everyone's celebrating and like, oh, look at the cute little baby. But then it gets the brutal truth and then it produces death. The truth is, sin is too powerful for you. See, sin is what we do when we don't depend on God. It's a lack of faith in who and what our ever-present help is. And therefore, we depend on ourselves. We don't trust him. We double down on our fix. We look for solutions outside of him. Maybe we even somehow get twisted to think that he is the problem. And then we're somehow deceived to believe, like most of the world, that we are good. And we can get along on our own. And we don't need help. And if you read the Bible, and if you read the words of Jesus, and if you understand this text, you're understanding that no, there is no help without brutal honesty. There is no help without total dependency on him. See, what you and I need, we deeply need, is we need saved from evil. Not just the evil out there, but the evil that's in here that we somehow have forgotten or have soothed away or reframed or shaped. It's not that bad, and I'm not really, and no. If you don't really believe it's that bad, what will you not do? You will not ask for help. So how do we do this? How do we get brutally honest? Because it's when the Father is brutally honest about his faith that evil
is defeated. Do you see that? That's when it's able to be cast out. We saw the Father do it. We saw the disciples do it. And Jesus says, hey, if you want to do something that's effective, in trouble, you can only get help. This kind can only come out by prayer. What does he mean? He's saying, look, it's not a magic formula. It's not this list of disciplines that you somehow master. What it is, it's confession. It's this thing in our spirit where we go, I need to be brutally honest here. I know what my real problem is. I have sin, and I'm dead in my sins, and truthfully, I deserve justice. I don't deserve reward, and I need to repent. I need to have a change of heart. I need a change in mind and a change of direction because I don't totally trust God, and I don't have enough faith. And that's real, brutal confession. And if you want help from God, you will not get it without real, brutal honesty before Him. And you need to pray. You need prayer. And here's your prayer, okay? This isn't a magic prayer. This is just an easy way for us to think about it. God, help me. God, help me. There's no other gods. There's no other formula. There's no self-help but trusting in Jesus Christ to come to you. And so you say, God, help me. I know what my real problem is, and all I can do is ask for help. I need you to be my shelter. There's no other shelter. It's just you. You're the only one who is my ever-present help, able to be there for me when I need it. Now, in my own personal story, this text means a lot to me because I became a Christian. I was very deeply struggling with anxiety and depression and loneliness and just all the weight and the guilt of my sin. I mean, it was hard to sleep at night, and I couldn't even be around people without just feeling just uncontrollably, anxious. And I went and sought a pastor for help and met with him weekly. And I'm following God. I'm going to church. I'm reading the Bible. I'm praying. I don't miss a Sunday, and there's no relief. There's no help. And I'm like, why is there no help? And one time, this pastor friend of mine read this story to me, and he focused on the if you can. I went home that night, and I said, okay, God, if you can, this is where I'm at. I believe and I don't believe. Meet me here. And something happened that night. I don't know, I wouldn't call it a miracle. I would just call it, there was a shift in my heart. And slowly, over time, months and years, things began to improve. But I think back about that and I go, why was it slow? If you think about the story we read, when Jesus begins to heal the boy, it seems like it gets worse before it gets better, It's like, they were like, oh, he looks like he's dead. And then Jesus raises him up. It gets worse before it gets better. I wonder, why does it get worse before it gets better sometimes? And the brutal honesty is, and I know you won't like this, and I don't like this, but it's true, is if God removed the struggle completely from us, the truth is, in that season of my life, I would not depend on him deeply. It's true. If he took all the problems out of your life and all the trouble out of your life, you wouldn't run to him. You wouldn't ask for help. You would stay dead in your sin. See, I couldn't be helped until publicly, privately, I was brutally honest with God, others, and myself. And the same is true for you. And I want you to know that if you ask God for help, specifically how the Father did, help me overcome. Do you know that word? The word is boetheo. It's two words, a compound word in the Greek language. And the theo part literally means to run to the aid, to run to the rescue. Now, something happens in my house quite frequently over the years, not as much as my kids have gotten older, but especially when they were little, is something would happen in the middle of the night. They would have an issue, they would have an accident in bed, or They'd be scared or they'd be sick and throwing up. Every parent's nightmare. And so what would happen, and this is the way it sets up in our house, they would have to come out of their room into the dark hallway because we keep our house dark. You know what I mean? And then they would have to approach our room. And our room has a door that's cracked. And I put myself in their shoes, and so every time they're dealing with a problem, they're afraid, they don't know, they need help, they have to kind of walk out of their room and come to our room, and it's like a slightly cracked door, and our room is dark on the inside. I mean, blackout curtains, no lights getting in there because we're sleeping, okay? And so here they come, and this happens every time. They will outside the door go, "Dad," And I've trained myself to hear them, and I get up, and I race over, do whatever they need, cleaned up, soothed, helped, put back to bed. Once they're calm, I leave, and I go back to my room, and then they come and get me in 5. No, sometimes that happens. But can you imagine being in their shoes, and they're looking at this cracked door, and it's dark, and they're like, I have a need. I need help. I think Dad's in there. I can't see him. And then just let it out. "Huh, Dad!" And then I come bursting out. In the very same way, this is how we approach God. You see the door cracked. You think he's in there. Do you want to find out? Just, "Dad, I need help." And he will come racing out of that door into whatever hole that you have dug, because that's who he is. He is our ever-present help. And until we get to a place where we can ask for help like that, help doesn't come. Because without brutal honesty, there is no help. There's no help. Now, when Jesus was on the cross, something just kind of amazing happened that we don't always think about, but we need to be reminded of week after week. But he's on the cross, and the crowds are sort of looking at what's happening, and they say in Matthew 27, they say, the crowd said, "Now leave him alone. He's suffering, he's hanging, he's in dire straits. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him or to help him." And when Jesus cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. You have to see this. Jesus cried out, and there was no answer. Jesus called out to his Father, and God withdrew. Jesus was not helped on the cross. He died the death you deserve and I deserve. The most faithful person, the one who never had a problem with trusting his heavenly Father, cried out again, and his Father didn't come. And he did that. He forsook Jesus so that he could save you. So how do you need help? God is able to help with what you need, with what you can't do, and what you don't have. And the brutal, honest truth is, you need a sacrifice for your sins. You need a faith in Jesus Christ to regenerate your heart. You need to confess he's the only one that can save. You need to repent and change your life and to totally trust and surrender in him. You need to step into the baptistry and take off the old and put on the new. You need to call out for help. And until you do, there will be no help. But today, he is an ever-present help. When you come to total honesty, he's able, and he's waiting, and he's wanting, he's hoping you call his name so he can come into your situation. Today, maybe you need to do that. You can come over here. I'm coming down here. You can come talk to me. You can go back to the 103. Would you stand with me, and let's sing together?